Hallo Freunde, willkommen zurück zu .NET API Review. Apparently last week was a banner week for opening issues because .NET 11 no longer fits on one screen. So if we don't start making progress soon, we might have to find time in people's schedules to increase frequency. But let's hope we can knock some out this week instead of just pushing them on the burner for next week. To that end, we'll start with new process APIs 125.838. Adam.
Jeremy, before I start, could you please hit refresh because I have found one minor bug that I have fixed a minute before full hour. So I'm not sure when you have opened this website.
Right.
Yeah, so a recap. Last week, we have got to a conclusion that we don't want to have two option bugs for processes because it would lead to user confusion. Namely, people would be like, is the old option bug getting obsoleted? Are we going to add a new feature to the old option bug as well? So we have agreed and we are all on board that we are going to stick with a single option bug, namely process start info. And the first thing that I would like it to have, I would like to extend it with the ability to specify standard input, output, and error handles. They are null by default. If you don't provide anything, we just keep working as we used to. But then we also, for years, wanted to limit the inheritance. And in 2020, we have approved an API that would say, that was called inherit handles. It was a Boolean flag that would say inherit. It was when it was set to true, it would be like inherit all of the inheritable handles. When it would be set to false, it would be inherit only standard input, output, and error handles. However, I believe that it's incomplete because I believe it's a fine scenario to, let's say, inherit standard input, output, and error, and let's say one anonymous pipe for the purpose of inter-process communication. So I would like to extend it with a property called inherited handles. The name was already approved for process start options. The next thing that is important to handles, in 99% of the cases, we should dispose them. And we should do it by default. So people are not worried about this and they don't run into some certain edge case bugs. This is why I would like to also extend it with a flag that says leave handles open, which would be set to false by default. And it would apply to all of the standard handles and the inherited handles. And in the regard of handles, I'm not sure if it's good that we have 6 properties. Jan has suggested that maybe we could get rid of the Boolean flag. And Jeremy, if you scroll down to the alternative design, the alternative design says let's remove. It wasn't Jan's idea. It was just like an observation, and this is my idea, like how we could tackle it, if I remember correctly. So if it's wrong, I don't want to blame Jan for it. Basically, let's remove the Boolean flag and make the inherited handles property nullable. When it's set to null, we inherit all of the handles. When it's set to a collection, we inherit only standard input, output, error, and the selected handles from the allow list. And if the list is empty but not null, it means just give me the standard input, output, and error.
I don't understand for the original design for the non-alternative, the one that you're proposing. What is the behavior of inherited handles? Because you have it non-nullable. It's gonna start out empty, but the default behavior to maintain backwards compatibility would be to inherit everything.
Yeah, basically, this would be the case. So the behavior would be, in order to limit the inheritance, you would either need to set the Boolean flag to false.
Oh, I see.
Or add any handle to the inherited handles.
Yeah, not a huge fan. I'd prefer just having, like, if we want to allow explicit inheritance of explicit values, remove the Boolean and just have inherited handles be nullable. I wasn't sure about the additional naming. I didn't get that, but just make this nullable. And if it's non-null, that's what you inherit. And if it's null, you inherit everything.
Or we just create a new options type. It's so clean. No, I'm just kidding. I think nullable makes sense. Just kidding. Obviously.
Yeah.
And we're happy with any performance ramifications that come with this being non-null and empty, or just non-null in general.
Again, on newer OS mainstream OSs, it's can be implemented in performant way, but yes, it's like on kind of non outside Mac OS, Windows, Linux, or on alt Linux. Yeah, it's kind of expensive option, but
so on old Linux would be like 32,000 syscalls or something, right?
Yeah, but this is a very good question. So, as Jan said, so it was approved in 2020. Back then, we couldn't really implement it on Windows because we were supporting a Windows version that didn't provide this. So now we support the Windows that always provides this. The same goes for Mac OS. And when it comes to Linux and FreeBSD and Android, it depends on the kernel version. And I'm not sure how it should work on the older kernels. Namely, should we perform the expensive syscalls and try to basically iterate over all 5 handles and close them individually, or just document this as a best effort on and in the regard of what is supported? And
did you say on more recent Windows and Mac OS we can implement this efficiently?
Yeah, on all of the supported macOS and Windows versions, it's always going to work efficiently. When it comes to Linux, I think it's the only Linux that we support that does not come with this is Red Hat 8 or 9, and I think we are going to stop supporting it in .NET 12.
All right, that's fine then. If when we can decide if we want to do the slow thing or document it, I think I'd prefer to do the slow thing just so it's consistent. But if that itself breeds any kind of inconsistency, then we would just document it, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, but I tend to agree that doing the slow thing or throwing exception platform not supported, would be kind of the good options. I don't think we should be kind of ignoring it. Oh, you are running on all the kernels, so we are not going to do what you asked for. That sounds wrong, right?
Okay.
All right. I was skimming through the book to see if we had any comments of like try not to distinguish the null versus empty collections, but I didn't turn one up. It feels slightly weird, but it also makes sense, and given that this is a bolt-on, I don't know that we can do it more cleanly.
And any thoughts about the additional or just inherited handles?
I think it should just be inherited. If it's additional,
Yeah.
that sends a wrong message about what it means when it's well, in general, I think it's the wrong meaning. Because it says it doesn't have anything to do with any handles that might already be open.
The reason why I have used the additional prefix here is that I'm not sure whether it's going to be obvious to the end users that they shouldn't add standard input, output, and error to this list. And I wasn't sure, and Golang is actually using the additional.
Oh, so the additional here
prefix.
is meant to relate to those three properties above it, not.
So no matter what you are going to set in the option back, you always derive standard input, output, and error if you provide them here. And if you want something more, you have to add it to the list. Or if you set it to null, you end up inheriting only those three.
I thought the intent
to
was
an empty. To an empty.
I interpreted additional to mean beyond what would already be inherited, which today is everything.
Yeah,
everything allows it.
Okay. So maybe
Like,
let's stick with inherited handles.
Yeah, I'd prefer it just be documented on inherited handles that regardless of this, in order to make standard input, output, and error work, those are inherited. I think additional just makes it more complicated, but given your explanation, I think the other's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah. And one more question, is the non-null option going to be default in any of the convenience APIs, or are we just or are all convenience APIs, on the existing plan?
It's a great question. And I would generalize it and ask, like, should the convenience APIs do the thing we believe should be the recommended thing? For example, don't inherit other handles, kill the process when it exits, when the parent process exits. Like, I don't have the answer to this question. I would love to hear your feedback, and I believe it's an important question. Personally, I would be happy to enable the right things in the new APIs because it gives me the possibility to do the right things without introducing breaking changes. But it's just my personal preference.
The leave handles open thing, that's
Yes.
purely convenience, or does that provide something that's just calling dispose on all the handles and inherited handles and on any of the standard input output error handles that were set?
Yes.
Why? Just because it comes up a lot, or I'm trying to understand.
It comes up a lot, and you can run into tricky issues. For example, if you create a pipe and you make the process inherit it, the pipe won't report end of file until you also close the parent copy of the pipe. So I would like to have this flag and be set to false by default to make sure that we close these handles by default, because let's consider possible scenarios. Like if it's a pipe, you should close it. If it's a null file, you can also close it. You don't have to, but you should. When it comes to console.open standard input output error handle APIs, they return a handle that is not owned. So even if you dispose it, nothing happens. And when it comes to file, I believe in 99% of the cases, it will be file rather for reading or writing. So you should also close it. The only exception if you would like to use the same handle for reading from this file. So for example, you say redirect to file, but this handle allows for reading and writing, and the child will be writing and the parent will be reading.
Won't the like 99% case be that someone already has these handles in using blocks, or if they don't, they're going to get diagnostic warnings from the bazillion code analysis rules that look for and are a little noisy, things not being disposed?
I think it depends. If they assign them right to the properties, they're not going to get such warnings. At least I didn't when I was implementing it and I was building the thing locally. For example, if you do new process start info and then standard input handle equals console.open standard input handle, you don't store the handle anywhere in a field or in a variable, so you don't get any warning.
And
At least that's my understanding.
In most of our types that have this concept, they're disposing of the thing at the end of the use of the thing that's being created. But that's not the case here, right? Here you're disposing of them immediately. You're not waiting for the process itself to end or be disposed of.
Exactly.
And if someone were to get an exception between the point that they created the process start info and calling process.start, and they're relying on this, it won't happen.
It won't.
I mean, they're all safe handles, so they will free themselves if they're unrooted.
Sure, that's true regardless of this property. And if they were using blocks, it would happen more deterministically. Oh, this one makes me feel weird. I don't. Maybe I just need to see, like, I don't know. It feels weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, for the part that makes sense to me, so I mean, the API shape doesn't make sense, but the logical application that makes sense to me is that it's back when I was using pipes and fork and stuff in an OS class in college, I remember finding it very weird that you needed to call pipe, set a handle in the child process you were creating, and then now call close on the file handle that you just gave that process, because it feels like, well, didn't I just kill its handle? And it's like, no, because it got a copy of the handle. And that if you don't call that close, then nothing works right. So the part where this is hiding that from you, where it's avoiding that trap is good, but it does kind of have a smell.
But once you start talking about pipes, it's very advanced case, right? So it's like, I don't think it makes sense to create a property that makes, this like very advanced case a bit easier, right? It's like, I would actually think it's when you are using pipes, it's better to be explicit to make it clear what's going on than depend on, some property that close it for you under the covers, right? For simple file stream, maybe that makes sense, but in those cases, like they will be in using blocks most likely. So, it's this is just an alternative. Yeah.
The other APIs, standard input handle, standard output handle, standard error handle, inherited handles, those all add capabilities that someone can't do today. This one is it's convenience, and I'm not 100% certain that it's even really adding convenience. In fact, it might lead to more problems. Like you mentioned, assigning these safe handles directly. But if they're doing that, they're doing like standard input handle equals file.open handle XYZ, and standard output handle equals file.open handle ABC or whatever. Those can easily throw, and now they're actually decreasing the reliability of their application because this will never kick in, and they'll be waiting a non-deterministic amount of time for those safe handles to be finalized.
I see. So If I was not able to convince you, then maybe let's not introduce this Boolean flag as of today. If I get more data that shows that it would be the right thing to do, I will get back with another API proposal.
Sounds good. The other ones make sense to me.
Thank you.
What's the interplay going to be between if you set the existing redirect standard output to true and you set standard output handle to non-null? Is that just going to throw?
They're mutually exclusive, so you can use one or another.
So it's going to
So
throw?
start will throw.
Yeah, sorry, that's process.start will say you're in a I don't know what you mean, and it'll throw a argument exception or something.
Exactly.
Okay.
So there is one more property and that's proposed, that's the weird timeout.
Oh, what's this one?
So
Yeah, we haven't got to those last three, I guess.
yes, I have skipped them. I was planning to get back to them. So maybe let's start with the easy one. Kill on parent exit. It's a name that we approved for the new option bug before we decided to remove it. So I just would like to use exactly the same name, but in the old option bug. Kill on parent exit.
We can do that. We can implement that reliably everywhere.
We can implement it on Windows and with some extra work. And on Linux, on Mac, I didn't find a solution that is reliable. Like they don't provide a built-in mechanism for that.
And so is process start going to throw PNSE or is it going to ignore it?
We could also try to emulate it and do what the people are doing today, which is like sign up for the graceful process termination and kill the child process in such case on macOS.
But the current process is the parent.
The parent,
right?
yes.
What does that? What are you signing up for that's reliable to kill the child? Because by the time the parent is exited, you're not going to run anything.
So what people do today, they sign up for console control C in parent process. And so in case of graceful termination, they kill the child. They do it, yeah. And on Windows and Linux, we can do more. We can make it work on forced termination and on like failures. But on macOS, we cannot do more as of today, to my knowledge. Because each solution has some disadvantages. For example, we could make the parent process a leader of a session group, but it would have some other side effects. So I don't want to do it. So what I could do on outside of Windows and Linux would be to sign up for graceful parent process termination and force child to die, basically.
That feels like people are going to rely on it and not realize that they're only getting this benefit for a small portion of uses. So if we're going to keep this, I would prefer that we mark it as whatever our attribute is for OS specific for Windows and Linux and throw if it's set to true on Mac.
Okay. And one of the reasons why I really want to introduce it is that I have seen plenty of first-party services implementing Windows-specific thing just for this thing. And I hope it's going to help with reducing the number of file in use errors when the parent process dies.
The code that you've seen that's doing Windows specific stuff, that application is Windows only, or they're giving up on it for Mac, or what's
For example, SDK does that, and they just do it on Windows because they found that they can do it on Windows.
So
on
it's
other
like
operating systems, they don't enforce it.
It's like a backstop mechanism, and if it doesn't kick in, oh well, but if it does, their reliability improves. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
That makes me reconsider. I think it should definitely be annotated as platform specific. Makes me reconsider my throw suggestion. Maybe maybe we document it as best effort or something. I don't know.
Yeah, because Steve, also one of the things that I have realized when I was reading various source codes, how people use process, plenty of customers just sign up for Control C, so they don't kill the process when it's forcefully terminated, when it crashes. So for me, if they switch from that to the new API, it will be like value added, because like we will cover more edge cases. But your point is very valid. People could expect it to work all the time on every OS if it's not properly documented or annotated.
I guess I'm wondering if the name needs to convey more of a hedge, or we just document that it's not going to work everywhere. My concern is that folks that currently have workarounds are going to remove their workarounds.
Yeah, but the workarounds, will be about as good as what we provide as best effort. So, I think it's fine to have it as platform neutral, and where it's first class, do it in first class way. Where it's not first class, just do best effort, and mention it in the documentation.
Yeah, the only one I'd be concerned about, because if somebody implements it in the parent process, abnormal termination they can't recover from. But if they had implemented it in the spawned process to identify their parent and keep a let me know if it gets terminated and I'll exit, and then if they remove that code, then that becomes platform varietal. But that feels the like 6 people who got that right probably won't remove their code. They would be defensive.
That's what we do, and like we do that in the MCP C# SDK, for example. We basically, if there's a constant read happening on the standard in handle, and if that EOFs, it exits.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I put that it should say, I think the attribute supported OS, so, and if not, then adjust it to whatever the right answer is.
Okay.
All right, Jan, do you want to go ahead and object to start detached?
I think that's fine.
Okay.
Is this?
Yeah, we can start. So for those who weren't part of previous discussion, start detached starts the process in a way that it does the opposite of what we have just mentioned. That it's actually going to live if the parent exits, if somebody closes the terminal. It's just supposed to start long-running background services that should outlive the parent.
So kill on parent exit being true and start detached being true at the same time is nonsensical.
I would say it would be unusual, but I think it has clearly defined semantics. I think the start detach, what it really does, it kind of disconnects the new process from your current console or from the session or whatever the OS concept or
Yes.
that kind of thing is.
Yeah, I think I actually read it as start suspended, but it does say detached, not suspended. I can read.
Where does its standard out go in that case?
If you are not going to specify, we are going to redirect to null.
Specify where? How? Oh, you mean with the standard
Like
output handle?
Yeah, if you don't specify redirect standard output or provide a handle on your own, we are going to redirect to null. And the reason for that being is that if we don't do that, and for example, the child process inherits something, it will keep some resources alive for an extended period of time, and it's not desired.
And similarly, standard in that case, if it's not redirected, is null.
Yes.
Interesting.
And it's a niche feature, however, it's needed by Aspire. So this is why I'm bringing it, and I would like to introduce it in 11. And I have verified it, and some other programming languages provide similar concepts, and they even call the API in the same way, start detached.
Okay. Post exit drain timeout.
Okay.
What is
so,
this?
So let me get back to pipes again. When we start the process and it inherits a pipe, the pipe will report end of file when all of the copies of that handle are closed. However, in .NET, by default, when we start a new process, it inherits all of the handles, and this is the same for plenty of other programming languages except of Golang. So if a child process starts another child process, which I will call it grandchild, it will inherit the same pipes, meaning that if the direct child exits, however, the grandchild keeps running, we are not getting end of file. And because of that, some of our read APIs in process are prone to deadlocks in scenario where the child started another process. The solution I would like to propose, for example, later down here, I'm proposing read all text, read all lines methods. I want them to do a multiplexing or like monitor standard output and error and process exit. If the process exit, wait this amount of time specified by this timeout to see if you get end of file on standard output and error. If you don't, just stop reading. Because we are in this weird scenario where the process started another process that inherited those handles as well. And
but you don't know whether it's the grandchildren that are actually causing the delay.
Or if it was
Right, it could
intentional.
be any process,
so
right?
There are like three scenarios. It could be grandchildren. It could be another it could be a sibling who was started in the meantime and also happened to inherit those handles. Or it could be a delay. I have verified that, and on different OSs, like the order is different. For example, on Mac OS, we almost always got the information that the process has exited. And few milliseconds after it, we get an information that there is an end of file on standard output, error, and input. So,
And if the child process purposefully gave its handles to its child, and its child is still using them?
it's fine because they have their own copies. We are just going to stop reading from it. We won't wait for the end of file.
Right, but it's if it was intentional that the spawned process spawned sub processes and gave them the handle, you're now defeating that scenario.
Yes.
And null, you say when null default is used. Default, you mean like I'm interpreting default here to mean you're changing the existing behavior. Am I misinterpreting that?
It depends whether we apply it only to the new methods or to the existing methods as well. I would like to do the latter because I have been working with plenty of people who have run into this problem, namely SDK and MS Build team, and it took them a lot of time to get into realizing that they're hitting this exact problem.
What?
But this comes back to
isn't
the
this-
same thing with the Boolean we already got rid of leave handles open, is you're 100% assuming that the handles that you've given to this structure are now entirely owned by the call to process.start.
I also don't understand why this is related to process start. Why isn't, if we want to have a timeout for this, like we already do on wait for exit, but a specialized one, why isn't this part of wait for exit rather than part of, this has nothing to do with process start.
Because if we make it a part of process start, then I can make it work for the existing APIs, like begin read lines, etc.
Well, when you say make it work, you mean change the behavior of the existing
Yes.
APIs.
Well, like I think the proper name for this should be workaround bugs in child processes.
Yeah, so I agree that we are workarounding it. However, I think that this particular problem is quite common and it's really hard to diagnose. Like how many engineers, would like spot this in less than a workday?
So should we work on making it easier to diagnose instead? It's
Could you repeat? Work on.
Should we work on like a base to make it easier to diagnose? Or document, or something, in any case, I don't think this makes sense as a default anywhere,
Yeah, the reason why I needed it is because I would like to make the new read methods make a promise that if you ever use them, you are never going to run into deadlocks, basically. When just capturing the output of the direct child process.
But like you are not, you cannot even promise that. It's like if the child process gets hung, kind of doesn't exit ever, you
Yes,
hit another bug in child process and you get a deadlock, right? So
or if the child tries to read from the parent and the parent's blocked waiting for the child to write.
So you can't solve a logical deadlock.
yes, of course. Yeah, so I have worded myself wrong.
And
so
are
let me take it back. So I just want to prevent people running into the edge case bugs when it's not really their fault.
But basically, it seems like the only way you can do this is, so you're basically doing process on exit, close standard input, output, and error that you pass to start info, and maybe also everything from inherited handles?
No, the way it works, you can just cancel the two outstanding reads to standard output and standard error.
Okay, but if they passed a pipe through,
the wait for you're changing the implementation of wait for exit based on this, right?
Yes.
but if you passed a pipe handle via inherited handles and not standard input, output, or error, you're like, that problem's still there.
Yeah, and I cannot prevent from running into it because I don't have a control of what the child process does.
If someone uses the new inherited handles and just assigns it to array.empty, and they do that consistently in both in the parent process and the child process, the scenario you're describing doesn't happen, right? So you're really describing a scenario where
unfortunately it happens, because what they would need to do, because by default in .NET we inherit the standard input and output of the parent process. So if the first child is started with an output redirected to a pipe and it starts another process, and we just say just inherit the standard input, output, and error, it means that the output points to the pipe that is being used. That comes from the.
Don't we mark all those handles in the child process as non-inheritable?
Unfortunately, none of the operating systems allows for that. So basically, before you start the process, you need to make it inheritable, and you just start the process, and it's inheritable in the process, inside the process once it's started. There is no API to do it.
How are you implementing inherited handles then?
I'm providing it an allow list, like inherit only these handles.
Right, but the child process then inherits them.
Yes.
If when the child process then spawns another process using inherited handles equals array.empty, it will not, the grandchild will not inherit the handles that the child inherited, correct?
The handles from the inherited handles, not. But
right, so going back to what I said,
standard input, output, and error handle, it will inherit.
Wait.
You're saying that when I spawn a child process and I say its input handle is X and its output handle is Y, and it then spawns another child process, and it did not include X and Y in inherited handles given to the grandchild. You're saying the grandchild inherits X and Y?
Yes.
This is broken.
I believe the default is if you create a child process, its standard output goes to your output, but your standard input doesn't flow to your child's input. Does it?
It does, because by default, standard input, output, and error are inheritable.
But you're explicitly controlling what handles are being passed to the child.
Yes, and the child is started with those 3 handles marked as inheritable. And now it's
So
up to
this
the
is like
child.
on
But those,
.NET
but
today.
the sorry,
Sorry.
parent is the parent passes handles X and Y to the child as the child's input and output,
Yes.
and no other inherited handles. The child has a different A and B input and output handle that it gives to the grandchild. But you're saying that even though X and Y
You
aren't,
said different.
yes,
Yeah, so in that case, it works.
Okay.
Like in such case, it's not being inherited and by the grandchild. Please excuse me. I think I misunderstood you.
Okay.
The problem is if they don't set it to anything and they use the default, then they
My point
inherit
is someone
the
using the
defaults.
new APIs can completely avoid this.
Absolutely.
So this post-exit drain timeout was really only an attempt to change existing behavior.
Yes, and tech stack we don't control. For example, let's say that you start a bash script or that starts some processes. It by default also inherits everything. If it spawns another grandchild process.
Like and they have bugs basically around this corner case, right? So it's
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether Bash has these bugs or not, but
I did the research, and the only programming framework that, like from the modern and big ones, the only one that by default does not propagate the inheritance and by default redirects everything to null is Golang. If you haven't said anything,
Go. No, I just like agree. It's nice. Go makes decisions that are different from Unix. They also default to no delay with sockets, even though that doesn't match the OS default. Like they make opinionated decisions.
but you know what? I don't need the post-exit drain timeout today, and I think maybe I will prepare more data and code samples and come back with this API proposal in the future. And basically, let's skip it for today. We need more data.
Okay, so I believe we have finished this block.
Yes. And safe process handle API was approved. The changes that I would like to make. Start suspended goes away, and start does not take process start options, but instead process start info. Then from the simple changes, resume also goes away because we are not introducing start suspended yet. And kill process group and signal process group also go away because we cannot really mimic Unix behavior on Windows. There are some differences. Maybe we are going to decide to do it this way, but not as of today. I don't want to spend time trying to. And based on feedback from Tom Desane, I wanted kill to return true or false, whether it was killed or not. And this is something that we could really provide on Windows because on Windows killing is synchronous. However, on Unix, sending a signal is asynchronous. So we would just say, yeah, we have delivered the signal, but it wouldn't mean that the process was killed. So big thanks to Tom for pointing this out. So kill is going to return void instead of bool. However, for signals, we want to return bool just to let the users know without throwing an exception that this process is still alive and it has received the signal.
So if you really wanted the bool behavior, you could just signal the kill 9, whatever.
Yeah.
And you could see that at least it was received, but not that it was actually shut down.
Exactly. And this information you will receive from the process exit status, which provides not only the exit code, but also signal. So if a process was signaled on Unix, it will be there.
What does safe process handle.start do differently from process.start? Is it purely it because process.start, if I remember correctly, it does a whole bunch of work to start the process. It gets a safe process handle and it wraps it in a process object. Is this just avoiding wrapping it in a process object?
Yes, it's for a scenario where you don't need a heavy process, you just need something very lightweight.
What do you mean by you don't need a heavy process?
For example, the code size. Today, if you just do process.start and wait for exit for hello world, it will be like 1.5 MB.
You're talking about trimming, like you're trying to trim away the process class.
Yeah, and if you basically need a simpler API, like a subset of it.
And then when I want to wait for this, oh, I see. You have APIs down below. Those, the wait for exit ones are ones that what are those? We already have those?
We have already approved those names a few weeks ago.
So this is trying to say you want to be able to trim away process. You can use this smaller surface area.
Yes.
And the process API today is such that that doesn't automatically happen based on what APIs you call. Like there's something that's rooting more of the implementation. If I just say process.start and either and then process.wait for exit, I'm rooting a significant amount of the process implementation beyond start and wait for exit.
You do. I don't know exactly why. I haven't gotten into the details, but my idea here was to have something similar to file stream and random access, where you basically allow for a subset of operations and have a more lightweight type.
Jan, do you know what? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but one of the problems with process, it has fields that point to the performance counters and bunch of the kind of diagnostic informations, and like there's this like a refresh method that kind of gets called in places that is hard to trim it. Maybe if we spend time on trying to refactor it, it may be possible to make to improve the trimability, but when I looked at it, it didn't look simple.
I see. So we basically reference everything via methods that get called and everything.
I'm not sure what you mean, but
you mentioned refresh, like we call refresh when accessing a whole bunch of properties or when refresh needs to grab everything, so or whatever. So it's you're rooting most of it even if you just only access a single method or property.
Yeah, so we would need to kind of create a scheme that refresh only is refreshing what's actually referenced, but it doesn't. It's very unnatural pattern. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Even if we can make process be trimmable, and even if basically no one calls this, I feel like adding the start here is not a thing we would regret. Like, I think it's fine. If someone wants to play with just handles, let them play with just handles.
The reason I'm pushing on this is adding like safe process handle was basically just a wrapper for a process ID and one-to-one APIs effectively for syscalls related to that process ID. Start brings with a whole bunch of policy, which we're now imbuing into I give you a static method, but a method on safe process handle. It's the only thing that sets off little alarm bells, but I think it's okay. It's just there's a lot more policy here than there is without this method.
That's fair. Adam, chat has asked, kill is async on Unix and sync on Windows. So Windows kill actually waits for the process to exit before it returns, or is it also fire and forget?
On Windows, it's synchronous. And as you said, on Unix, it's async.
Okay, so on Windows, when you call kill, it does not exit until the process does. Or the method does not return until the process
I
exits.
would need to verify that. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, so it might be.
The code pattern that is always safe is call kill and then call wait for exit. However, the proposed API for safe file handle, you have a method that will do it for you, like wait for exit or kill on timeout. Or kill on cancellation, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm reading the Windows SDK documentation for terminate process. I assume that the kill calls terminate process, and it says otherwise terminate process is asynchronous. It initiates termination tentatives immediately. So I think if the docs are right, it's asynchronous on Windows as well.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification, and apologies for misleading you.
I mean, that it's actually nicer that way. It means that it's fire and forget everywhere. And I think now we're down to.
Did this
Safe file
change?
handle
Sorry,
is-
did this change whether we turn a bool on kill? Does it still not make sense? Should it still just be void? Because it could be bool is to like a process was alive to receive a signal, right? I mean, that's kind of what it means.
Yeah, so
It
basically
kind of
it would
means-
mean we have successfully sent a request to kill the process.
The process wasn't already dead.
Yes, exactly.
Seems handy. I mean, I don't think the bool implies any more than void, whether it's blocking or not. Like that could be different regardless.
I don't care either way, but I'm really curious. What's the scenario where you want to kill a process and you care whether it was alive or not when you tried to kill it?
It's niche. I agree. It would mostly whatever it would be looking at it, you couldn't reliably know if the process did anything with the signal. Maybe for logging or something. But yeah, I agree. It would be niche.
It's niche and it's useful for a scenario where, for example, you wait 200 milliseconds for a process to exit. It haven't exited, so you think it has timeout, and now you try to kill it. But in the meantime, it could have actually exited, finished, and worked just fine. So
Yeah, if the target process is already terminated, and let's ignore any world where the PID gets reused. If the target process is already terminated, kill does not throw, right? It's just like, yeah, whatever. Yeah.
The point in the discussion on the issue about returning bool was if you return bool, it makes it look like you need to act on the bool, So, and it doesn't make sense in 99% case to act on the bool at all. So,
right, like interactively when using like the kill command, like I actually do like that information, which it sometimes gives me, like with the PID, which is different because you already have a handle here, which is like, you know what, that PID didn't exist anymore. Like, so maybe you didn't do what you thought you just did. So
Yeah.
it can be a useful signal to like know for sure what you didn't do anything. Like it's more like it's not a positive signal, it's like a negative signal. It's like if it returned false, like this was clearly useless. And I do think there's some utility in that.
you can always call the signal, but
which is fair.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as long as we make
Yeah.
signal of POSIX signal.kill work on Windows, then you have the Boolean. You just have to go out of your way to get it.
Is that what
yeah,
is the kill method implemented to literally call signal POSIX signal.kill?
Yes. It's basically forced termination.
I'm wondering more strictly, like, are they provably identical because one just delegates to the other?
Yes, I think so. And I think maybe the delegation goes in opposite directions on Unix
Oh,
versus
okay,
Windows,
sure.
but yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine leaving it void since it could cause confusion and Signal is like more explicit about what the bool means, and so we're not blocking anything. I just figured it was worth talking about since we knew it was non-blocking.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up. This is why I made it return bool at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you know, the answer is RTFM, but I can entirely believe that people would think if kill returned a boolean that it's is the process dead now or something. And that's not what it's answering. It's was it alive when you called the method?
And if we can continue to the next API. So recently I have introduced safe handle.create anonymous pipe. And during the discussion that was related to handle inheritance, I realized that we don't provide a public API to check if given handle is inheritable. So I think it would be nice to expose this information publicly. So, and because this information should not be cached, because it can change, because somebody can change the flags, it's a method, and it's called isInheritable.
I understand why we might want it on safe file handle. There are other safe handles that can represent a file descriptor or a handle that can be inherited. Is safe? Do we want to consider pushing this down, or because it doesn't make sense on some safe handles, we shouldn't?
So it makes sense on pipe, socket, memory mapped file. For other handles, I think that there are most likely some that it does not make sense because some handles are just, you cannot inherit them. For example, if I remember correctly, sorry, there are some pseudo handles on Windows. I don't remember which ones exactly, but you cannot inherit them. So I'm not sure if it would be feasible to implement it or what would be the behavior, if, for example, if it doesn't make sense for a given handle.
If we do have it just on safe file handle, why is it get only? That we have the ability to change the inheritability of an arbitrary file descriptor or handle, right?
Yes, we do. And it's a great point. We could expose it, and then it could be a property. But then again, this information is not going to be cached, and it may be like, you know, not a typical property. That is basically, to a certain degree, expensive to call.
What is code generally going to do with this information?
For example, the process spawning logic will check if given handle is inheritable. If it's already inheritable, it will just pass it. If it's not, it's going to, for example, on Windows, create a duplicated handle that is marked as inheritable.
As part of process.start.
Yes. And I have already implemented this API using Copilot in runtime, and I have found one place where I could have used it outside of process. It was like memory mapped files tests, where a test was checking if it's inheritable or not. But I haven't found any place where we would be trying to disable the inheritance after the handle was created. Basically, we always try to create them as not inheritable by default, and in case you want it to be inheritable, we create it as such. But I haven't found any places where we would be willing to like change the existing state of a handle that we already
The inherited handles property. Jeremy, could you scroll up a few lines? So isn't it already going to need to be able to check all the other kinds of safe handles to know whether they're inheritable? Like it's going to need to know whether this is the safe memory mapped. It's going to need to pull out the file descriptor and try and do the syscall to check.
On Windows, yes.
Not on Unix.
No.
Why?
Because on Unix, after fork, we have a copy of the parent process, and the logic will just remove the close on exec flag unconditionally from the selected handles. So it will modify the copy. So it won't apply in the parent. It will just apply to the child. So we can do it unconditionally. We don't need to check is it inheritable or not. Just remove the flag if it's there.
In other words, you don't need to check because we can always just set it regardless of whether it was inherited or not.
Mm-hmm.
Or I guess if it wasn't inherited, you're not going to see it in the fork. So then it doesn't matter.
So after fork, it's still alive because the close on exec flag says
it's
close
on
it
exec.
after
Okay.
exec.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And to be honest, I also want to in these APIs, I want to recommend the users to provide non-inheritable handles to us, just so they don't run into a problem that they created an inheritable handle and somebody in the meantime used the API that does not limit the inheritance and suddenly started a process that inherited this handle. So
I guess where I'm struggling is the disconnect between the type of inherited handles and is inherited only showing up on safe file handle. So if I have a safe pipe handle, a safe memory map file handle, a safe whatever handle, those can all be put into inherited handles, but code can't check there is inheritable because they don't have one. So any code that was working in terms of safe handle is already going to need to be able to deal with these arbitrary other types. And is already going to need the checks in place to deal with them. So then they would be special casing safe file handle, I guess, for perf.
What's the case where someone other than process start wants to ask this question?
I was thinking about this, and my scenario would be like people who want to ensure that they don't create inheritable handles anywhere in their code. For example,
So nobody.
No, like. But also, if that's the case, then they have no way to change it if it's just read only.
Yeah, this is really partially because we're over an hour on this issue already. It's if this is not actually necessary right now, punt it.
Okay.
If you're not solving a problem, punt it.
Let's move on.
So. If it's solving an actual problem, then let's explain the problem it's solving, and then we can see how we feel about it. But it sounds like it's you need it for your implementation, but I don't know. It didn't sound like any other callers ever would want it. So.
Yeah, so I need it for my implementation, and I also want to recommend to people like don't give me inheritable handles. Like I will deal with the inheritance in the best way I can. Just give me the handles that are not inheritable, so you don't run into edge case bugs.
But we have a whole bunch of safe handle types that I don't think are inheritable at all. Like I don't think that local alloc handles can flow. I don't think any of the crypto handles can flow. I don't think anything that anybody else is using safe handle just to get a reliable dispose flow and reference counting is gonna like safe handle in .NET no longer means OS handle, and so we can't push it down, and that means we need to think more.
Speaking of which, I would like to expose some new process APIs. Since it's currently it's easy to run into deadlocks if you just read output or error or you do it somehow wrong. I would like to expose methods that allow you to read all lines async, read all text async but you can also read all bytes or read all bytes async. When it comes to reading all lines, it would be returning an enumerable of process output line. Process output line would be a read-only struct because I expect plenty of such instances to be created. With just the content and a Boolean information, whether it was standard output or error. And the reason why I want to stream those lines is that these APIs will be draining both output and error at the same time. So they will solve one way of running into, they will avoid one way of running into deadlocks with process, where you just drain one of them. And those APIs that I have mentioned, they would be instance methods for flexibility. For example, I was talking to Visual Studio Code test runner team, and the way they handle their output lines, they wait for a certain line with a certain text, and as soon as it appears, they just kill the process. They don't wait for anything else because some plugins can be low that take some extra time. So this is why it's like on the instance. However, I would also like to provide static convenience methods that say capture all text output, or asynchronously, or just run the process, wait for it to exit and give me the exit status. Each overload takes either a process start info, where you can set up whatever you want, or for convenience, the file name, which is the path to the exit, and the arguments, the optional arguments. The last method that I would like to introduce is start and forget. So one of the feedback that I have received from GitHub is that it's quite common for .NET devs to not dispose the process because some people think that it's going to kill the process, which leads to resource leaks. So it would be just a helper method that would do like process start, store the PID, dispose the process, and return the PID. It's convenience, and yeah, that's my motivation behind providing it. When it comes to read all text and all bytes methods, they would be returning a value tuple of output of standard output and error. For bytes, it would be byte array. For string, it would be for text, it would be string. Any questions?
We not need an encoding from the process?
Process start info already comes with a property that allows it to provide encoding. There is standard input, standard output, and standard error encoding, if I remember correctly.
Okay, but
Moreover,
on
yes.
read all text here, can we ask the target process what its text encoding is?
So in general, we can ask only on Windows about what is the current encoding of current console. And on Unix, we just always use UTF-8.
For read all lines, should we have like a tuple of IEnumerable / IAsynchronable? I feel like it's creating and ordering between standard out and standard error that doesn't exist, which is like maybe fine. Like obviously you can like, you know, filter and unzip or whatever, and you don't lose anything. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a little weird.
Yeah, I think it's a very good observation. I wanted to have a struct, and it would be also a struct. So I wouldn't mind changing it to value tuple.
So we normally avoid value tuples in public API. What makes this special that it's allowed?
Well, I like the destructuring, but I think a slight caveat. I wasn't suggesting putting the tuple inside the IEnumerable. I was suggesting like two IEnumerables.
Well, as a person who's done things with the console before, assuming that this is going to read the lines as they manifest, This is actually giving you information that you can't get if they're two separate things.
Or not as easily. Yeah, no, that's true. That is true.
Like you
Yes,
do,
I mean,
if you
there is a time ordering.
because the console ends up interleaving the streams, and
Yeah.
so you can see text flowing as the program flows. But if you read the two things independently, then now you've lost where things happened in relation to the others. So the merged one, I actually think a lot of people would find useful, and if they want it unmerged, they can call enumerable.unzip.
All right, I take it back. I find all those arguments good. Yeah.
There was a feedback on the issue that the capture text output methods, it might make more sense to call them run something, because of they are just variant of the run.
It would be something like run and capture text output, for example.
All right, so read all lines and read all lines async as instance methods. So you're saying on Windows it'll use the process, ask the process what it thinks its encoding is, and on Unix it assumes UTF-8, and if people complain they want to control the encoding later, we'll add it as another overload?
No, they will add it to process start info when starting the process.
Not if you're grabbing a already running process. This is an instance method on process. I mean, if it only works on a process that you started, then sure.
So these methods are going to use exactly the same encoding that begin read standard output and other read related methods do on process, which is the thing that you provide via process start info.
Okay, so there's already these are taking a thing that already exists, but doing it better. Okay, fair enough. All right, so Tanner asked, why are we returning value tuple here? We do generally avoid it unless we believe there's never a case that we would ever want to evolve the return. Maybe we think that holds here, but if we do return value tuple, the name should be correct, which is they should be not cased as if they're arguments or parameters. I forget which one's which, but as if they're properties. So everything needs to be capitalized.
I see.
Because the caller views them as a property, unless they decompose it. But if they grab the value, it's foo.standard output, and we said pretend it's a property.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I didn't the main reason why I didn't want to have another type is that we have two methods for capturing. Like one is the instance method that will capture the output from here and allow you to kill the process in the meantime, do whatever you want. And another is the high level method that is static, that will start the process, capture all of the output, wait for the exit. And for that, I actually needed a class to call it process text output. And over there, we have standard output and error, but we also have exit status and process ID. And if I was not introducing value tuple for the instance method, I wouldn't know how to name these two output types that are both related to process text output. How to differentiate them, basically.
Yeah, I mean, really, do we think that this is worth making a new class or struct to hold this two tuple? Because in the future, there may be other things you want to add to the return information. Because once you do this, you can't change the return.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I don't have anything else that I would like to expose here.
Fair
It
enough.
doesn't.
Does that satisfy your concern, Tanner?
Um, this is this one to me feels a little bit point in time where some of the other places we've used value tuples in public API are things like enumerable, where you're taking two items and decomposing to or you're taking one item, decomposing it to two, and we're never going to change from that. Or something like divrem, where divrem will never have anything more than what is fundamentally two values, the quotient and remainder. Whereas this one feels like something where today we don't have anything else we want to expose, but that may not hold permanently. You may want to, you might want to have encoding information, if it is available, added onto it, and you wouldn't be able to extend with that information in the future. You might want to be able to include information like number of lines, or be able to split by line here, which is a little bit different from the read all lines that returns an IEnumerable. There's just a number of APIs, and even on console and file stream, we have some of those deviations already for what you can do between one line at a time or many lines all at once, or even separating out the streams so that you could, why does read all text async require returning both the standard output and the standard error, rather than, for example, returning two tasks that allow you to get them independently if they are in fact separate streams? There's just a lot of things that you could want to handle in the future that I'm not sure that the current shape allows extending or supporting, if we ever decided to do that.
Yeah, so I can respond to that. So when it comes to encoding, you have to provide it upfront, and you can obtain it via process start info. When it comes to the number of lines, if you are interested in getting the lines, you shouldn't be using read all text. You should be using read all lines. So I just don't see any information that would make sense here. And the reason why we are providing two is that if you try to read only one of them and you forget about the other, and somebody keeps writing to the other pipe and it's getting full, the producer is getting deadlocked. It's basically waiting for you to consume it. So in order to prevent users from running into deadlocks, we are consuming both at the same time, using the right way to do it, specific to given operating system, and ensuring that they are not going to run into a deadlock because somebody was not properly consuming the produced output or error.
I just want to +1, Adam. I think, to Tanner's points, if we had introduced this API 30 years ago and C# looked at all like this, which obviously it didn't exist, but we would want this API. Processes haven't changed that much. This is like the high level process. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good here. This is really nice API. You can use discard for the streams that you don't care about. It waits for the process to exit, presumably. Like all that good stuff. There are other APIs for all the kind of variations and more niche use cases you mentioned.
I mean, I will say this does have the problem of, if you really only care about standard output, and you, for example, do open parenthesis string standard output comma underscore equal read all text, we're still paying the cost of all the string concats to build standard error that you're just throwing it away, when it would have been better to drain it. But
yeah, but as of today, if you start the process with only output redirected, then the error goes to the parent process, and you can do process.standard output.read until the end. I forgot the exact name, but we expose a string reader that gives you the ability to read entire single thing. But the problem starts when you want to read both.
And we don't need to differentiate between there was no stream, or the stream had no text written to it versus the stream was activated and had nothing written to it. So we don't need to differentiate between empty and null here.
It's a good question. We could definitely do it, and null would mean like absolutely nothing was provided. But I don't think I don't think it's possible to send like an empty message. So an empty string will mean exactly the same thing. And so I was just thinking that if we promise people that you are never going to get null here and empty always means what we have just said, like nothing was sent, then they will have to deal with one less null check. This was my reasoning. I'm perfectly fine making it return a null if you want.
Yeah, sounds good. I actually have someone at the door, so I will have to run real quick.
Okay. So it sort of sounds like there are a lot of hesitation, but I don't know that it's something we would necessarily regret. So maybe these are fine to add, and if we find something that we wish that we added to them, we have to come up with a clunky name because we burned the good name. But the chat has asked why can't these just return process text output? I assume it's because they don't have an exit code.
Yes, exactly. And then I would also need to introduce process byte output. And the reason why I'm not providing process byte output is that I believe that capturing raw bytes is a valid scenario, but it's not as common as capturing text. So this is why you get the instance method, but you don't get a high-level convenience method that will do everything for you. You will have to write this 3 lines of code on your own.
Sorry if I missed this, but with it not having the exit code, does that mean that like if the standard out and standard error handles are closed by the process and it's still running, there's a difference in behavior there?
Yes. Basically, when you call read all text and the process did like close 1, close 2, we just give you the text, but it doesn't mean the process has finished. You need to call wait for exit.
Yeah, I do think a lot of people are just going to assume, even if there is no exit code, that you're going to like wait on that anyway. Like they might not care about it, but it might matter for like some cleanup scenarios. I do think that there are going to be people who call that, don't call, wait for exit, and end up, it's a little bit of a foot gun, a little bit. Like I get the wanting to get the data ASAP, but this is like the super high level API. Like what you described there is like pretty unusual.
I mean, yeah, somebody closing standard out is also pretty unusual.
But that's what I mean, right? So it's like better, like it's not going to make a difference most of the time anyway, to just wait for the process exit, even if you don't service the X code, and it will make a certain cleanup logic like less likely to be buggy.
Oh no, I mean like if you are being a power user and you want to close standard output and standard error to tell your parent, I'm never going to give you more information through these channels, and then you're doing like process cleanup, like why make your parent wait? That, like, that's the reason you called close. So
maybe.
Mr. Tobe, if you're still with us, how do you feel about these methods taking cancellation token in addition to or instead of time span?
He's not.
He's not.
I'm supportive as your representative, Stephen. No.
Because cancellation token, you can use any sort of event pattern that you want to shove the cancel in there. The synchronous read all text, if you had some other signal saying I'm done now, like you have no way of terminating this. So I feel like taking cancellation token here is valuable.
Whatever.
But
no, I don't. Just use the async version if you have that kind of use case.
You're not necessarily in an async context.
And in the implementation, it would require me to basically do sync over async, because I wouldn't be able to really implement it. Because for the synchronous methods, all of the operating systems, when it comes to multiplexing, which I will be using, like I will be basically using pull, output error, and a timeout, and they always expect the timeout to be in milliseconds. So there is no way to like provide the timeout and cancel it. Maybe I would actually need to create one more additional pipe, monitor it for notifications as well, and when somebody requests cancellation, then close this pipe.
Yeah, I mean, you could also
Treat
do it
as
by. I guess you'd have trouble understanding the new line. No, because if you're not caring about new lines here, you could do it by if they gave a cancellation token, you could always call the OS thing with a 1 second timeout and keep polling to ask if cancellation has happened. But we can leave it out.
Right, like make people do the sync over async themselves, and if we get like too much pushback that's like too inconvenient, you know, we can always add more APIs later, but like we don't need to do it now.
I have actually received pushback for trying to introduce the synchronous methods, and I believe that they solve a valid scenario. Like
guidelines say anytime you're thinking of adding an async, you probably also want this sync. So
and like sync methods just don't take cancellation tokens that frequently. Like I'm sure there are counter examples, but it's like pretty timeouts
Indeed.
seem to be more common.
It is, but this is certainly one of those cases that I could see somebody trying to do something clever when Control C is pressed.
and
Like I'm handling a soft exit. Go ahead and drain the thing I did with my child process and run on, save to a log and move on or whatever. But speaking of move on, we can move on.
They can use the async overload.
Yep. All right. Yeah, Jan already brought up that instead of having run and capture as top level verbs, maybe we want
Run and capture.
run async, and then run and capture text, and run and capture text async. I think we can drop output.
It sounds reasonable, especially since it's capturing both output and error. So
So run and capture text output is run and capture text. Okay. Place all. He's added the one that I replaced. Okay. Is there anything else? I guess nobody really commented on start and forget. Seems fine. I guess. Unless anybody wants to object now.
everybody forgot about it.
I did forget about it. Okay, what's the int represent?
The process ID.
Oh, process ID. I just need to keep reading the comment. Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. And then I assume that the file name and arguments match constructors for process start info.
Exactly.
I'm reading the YouTube chat, though I'm sure I know Jeremy is too. Do we need the file name overload for starting to forget?
I'm not sure if it's going to be that common.
You can always add it later.
Yeah. I don't know though. Like start and forget, honestly, the times where I do want to call that are the times when I'm like writing scripts and stuff where I want it to be the most convenient. Like almost more than the other ones I want it.
Fair enough. I guess we can just go ahead and approve it.
Yeah, like I'm normally receptive to it's non-breaking to add, but like, you know, the whole point of this is to make process nice, and this is, I think, a significant contributor.
Okay. Anything else in this one? So we went with inherited handles as the property, but made it nullable. We removed leave handles open and is inheritable, and post exit drain timeout. Kill on parent exit needs supported OS attributes. We'll leave the read all text and read all bytes as value tuples. Capture text output is run and capture text. And we added an overload to start and forget. I think I covered everything. Go once. Twice. Sold to the man from Poland.
Thank you. It took me quite a few attempts to get here.
I like it though.
And now
I
let's just hope that neither Tobe nor Jan are gonna want to come back with feedback of
We
after
didn't
they
do
dropped.
anything crazy. I doubt it.
All right.
Oh. I will just ask different people for reviewing my PRs. It's...
Okay. This one I think is a no-brainer. Allow process start info and process start arguments to be null. 124093. This is just nullable annotations.
Exactly. We don't throw for nulls for arguments, but the API doesn't make it clear.
Yeah.
Proved.
The perfect API change for GitHub Copilot agent demo.
Yeah, no, nullability fixes are great with I'm doing a similar thing in the MCP SDK where something was marked nullable. Well, not exactly the same, but isn't. But anyway, good at fixing stuff like that.
By the way, Jeremy, it always makes me wonder, why do we put partial in the API design proposal, since it's more or less an implementation detail? At least it seems to me.
Partial in the notes means we're modifying an existing class. Not partial in the notes means we're introducing a new class.
I think that's already
see.
implied by like the lack of minuses and plus, but yeah, it's
Well,
extra clear.
we wouldn't have diff syntax is only used in the approvals if it can't be expressed any other way.
Okay, because I definitely seen it where like when we're adding members to a class, we just have the pluses on the members that we added.
Yes, so people sometimes make proposals using diff syntax, and I have to rewrite them because the final approval is always in C# syntax unless it can't be expressed any other way.
Okay, good to know.
Diff syntax is not appreciated. So
change
I'm
how
sorry
do
because
the
I
ASP.NET
have been
Core
using it.
ones.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
no, I
but
mean that's a good clarification.
your previous
Yeah.
one, Adam, you were showing we're removing things we already discussed that requires diff. We're modifying a line. There's no way to express a modify, but when we're introducing new types, it's always just the clean what would be in the ref CS. You know,
or new members. Like new types, that makes perfect sense. But
Right.
you're also saying new members, you just use the partial syntax.
yeah. And apparently I forgot to write partial here, but yeah. So I just generally in the things have partial for. We don't need to read this line. It's a type that already exists. This is just context, and then the stuff in the middle is all new. Again, because we're also not showing this is the final state of what the process class would look like. So it's like this is part of the process class. So that's why I write partial.
All right, now we're officially not a single issue meeting.
Yeah.
We approved 2.
All right. Eric Sarpalis, are you with us?
I am, but I'm driving, so
Okay.
I cannot see anything.
Fair enough. So UTF-8 JSON writer.reset overloads to accept new JSON writer options configuration 123221. I think that this is just make reset look like the constructor and let you overwrite both sides.
Pretty much.
My question is UTF-8 JSON writer big enough that this is actually a concern, or should somebody just use new? Like, what are they saving? Is there an internal buffer that it's reusing?
Well, it's a class, so you allocate. For STJ internally, we are reusing these instances, and that actually does result in a pretty insubstantial performance increase. And I've had the need to use the exact same technique, i.e. reusing instances in other libraries, and I wasn't offered an API, so I had to use unsafe accessors to achieve the same thing. So it would have been nice if we could just have these APIs to recycle the instances.
Fair enough. I mean, really, for me, it comes down to, is there enough? If this is like a 24-byte class, then just deal with the GC pressure, but it looks like it might be holding buffers that are getting reused in the middle, so maybe that's
There's
where
a
it's
lot of
worthwhile.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it just delegates to the underlying buffer writer in most cases. So, like, you can always pull that. But in STJ, like, we got some pretty handsome performance improvements by also not allocating the JSON writers. So
Yeah, this can be like super inner loop.
Fair enough.
Like SignalR uses the reset APIs, and yeah, I'm sure we could use it more.
Yeah, so if this is allowing... So now the only concern is that this is allowing an instance that somebody's already decided that the options is going to be invariant, that the options are no longer invariant, but I don't think it's going to matter.
yeah.
So it seems fine. Objections? Sold.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was quick.
Yep. All right. Do we have people that want to debate on the name of Tarlink strategy for 10 minutes?
Want is a strong word, but I would like getting this API approved. So
yeah, there were comments from Tom Desane that the
From
ignore probably doesn't make sense for hard links. It does for symbolic links, and so maybe we want to switch the hard link back to a Boolean. But I think that the 3-mode enum still makes sense for one of the file copy situations we were talking about. Sorry, directory copy. So the enum might still make sense in system.io, just only for symlinks. So
yeah, okay, yeah, I do think it's important to not conflate hard links and soft links, probably in general. But what makes ignoring it like more sensible for soft links than for hard links, or vice versa? I forget which one it was. I assume ignoring soft links is okay and ignoring hard links is not, is basically the argument.
right. So with a hard and David, feel free to speak up whenever. For hard link, the file is there. It's just also shared with somebody else, and so it's when creating the archive or restoring the archive, it's do you care about restoring the file or the fact that it was a hard link? But either way, the file should be there. If it's symbolic link, that could be pointing to a path outside the archive, which means you might not want it as part of the archive, either to include it or when restoring it. because a symbolic link is just you specify a path, and
It's broken.
and then yeah, if you have a rooted Unix symlink and you're restoring that on Windows, what does it even make sense? Like, so the saying don't include symbolic links makes sense, and saying when creating read the contents of the file and include it as the file path makes sense, and also preserve the file link makes sense. Copy contents on extract for a symbolic link probably doesn't make sense, but that could just be throw.
What can be throw, you said? Are you talking about the directory copy thing that we were discussing the last time?
No, so if you're doing extract on a tar that has a symlink entry, copy contents doesn't make sense because you don't know what the contents were. I mean, I guess if
Right.
it's a relative
Or if it even
symlink to somewhere else
exists.
inside the archive, then you would know what the contents are. But if it's a rooted path, you wouldn't.
Feels like opening yourself up to security vulnerabilities if you're willing to copy contents of an arbitrary path. Obviously, you wouldn't. But yeah, I see the
Yeah.
point
So
there.
at extract, I
throwing might
understand
make sense.
preserve and ignore, and for create, I understand all three for symlinks. Go ahead, Stefan.
Yeah, I mean, copy content seems really convenient, particularly when it's like, I mean, I don't know. If you're using a symlink in an archive, you probably didn't copy the contents for a reason. So, I mean, maybe we just never do it. And then if you're taking arbitrary paths for symlinks that could be outside of your archive, you got to be really careful with that, obviously. Like, I almost feel like the only things that make sense is like preserve it as is in the archive, or like maybe ignore in some cases, or fail.
So
Like throw.
tar create copy contents make sense. It's this locally is a symlink to where the data lives, but when I create this tarball, I want you to have the data instead of the fact that I called it a symlink here. Like, I usually set up my .NET builds when I'm working on Linux stuff I symlink the test root thing for where the native libraries drop, because building the native libraries doesn't update the test root, and I always forget to run the repack command. And so I make it a symlink. But if I were to copy, I could see myself wanting to copy that directory somewhere else, and I would want the contents and not the link.
Yeah, I guess like, yeah, the easy thing is copy contents can only work for things that were already in the archive, which is easy enough. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Do we need the throw one?
For a link strategy?
Yeah. Just
mean-
be like, I don't expect this thing to contain any kind of links, and I would just rather fail.
I mean, we could certainly add it.
Can also add it in the future, no?
Indeed.
Of course, of course. So yeah, as long as we're not using like a bool, because I know like that was one of the suggestions.
So yes, if we want to say that we want so tar writing is rather like directory copying. So having the same enum for what does a tar writer do with symbolic links, and what does directory copy do with symbolic links, like that makes sense to share. So do we want this as system.io.symbolic link handling?
Man, yeah, I wonder if we are oversharing this. I just wonder if there's something that's just going to make tar different than normal copying. Like, for instance, the fact that like with tar, you may never want to give the option to copy stuff that's outside of the archive, but with like directory copy, meh. You know what I mean? It's like a little bit different. Like you might want to actually copy contents of links that are outside of the directory you're copying. That would probably be fine. for a directory copy if you someday gave that option, but that wouldn't be fine for tar. I don't think that would ever be fine for tar.
Mhm.
So I do wonder about like over conflating the link strategy here.
That I see your point on that, except the only time that I think that we would care about the distinction between copy contents if they're from the archive and if they're not, that's on extract. On create, I don't know that it makes so much sense. Like, I don't know why
I
someone would
just
pick
again
it.
over conflating though. Like I
Yeah.
think it's super easy to like think things can be shared and it ends up being a leaky abstraction. The safer thing is to have some duplication, and it won't be the end of the world if there's like a directory link strategy and a tar link strategy that's like exactly the same. Like that's honestly not a terrible place to be in, but like sharing stuff when then we really handcuff ourselves sometimes.
Okay. ESJ, David, thoughts?
Yeah, I think it does make sense to keep it separate, especially if there's asymmetric concerns.
It's fine by me to keep it separate. The problems are only when we try and make it shared. So, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I think based off Tom's feedback, hard links should change back to Boolean because we're either preserving the link or we're copying the contents. There's no ignore on them.
Or we might throw in the future, maybe, possibly. Because I don't expect it, I don't want it. And I know like this kind of argues against like you could only be extracting things you trust anyway, but maybe you're right. But anyway, it does take away that possibility in the future.
I don't know if there's a stronger scenario for throw, because I mean, if you have hard links in the tar, you are going to extract them anyway. It's not like the original inode or whatever the original file is not like you are going to throw for it. Like, why would you throw for the hard link then?
I mean, just better error reporting, basically. Like, because yes, you can disable it, but then you don't know if like things went wrong because you like lost a hard link or because like the directory was messed up for some or archive was messed up for some other reason when you opened it. Like, sure, you trust the person, but like if you're not expecting hard links, you're not extracting hard links. It might be better to say, hey, that's what's wrong as soon as possible, instead of like extracting, not getting what you expect for an unknown reason.
Okay, so is your proposal to have like symlink strategy and then hard link strategy because copy content
And just have two options for the hard link strategy for now. I don't think it's like super bad. It's more symmetric, which is actually kind of nice. Like tar soft link strategy, tar hard link strategy. And it's like more self-documenting. We can put stuff on the enum values.
if we are already isolating to system format tars, that's fine by me.
All right, so just split the enum and leave off ignore for hard link. Is that what
Yeah, I think that's fine, and it's like it's kind of symmetric. It gives us like the most options going forward if we rethink our thinking on what specifically the options for tar or directory should be.
Okay.
Will we wouldn't be appropriate to throw? I mean, if we have like one enum, just throw ignore for, actually, does that make sense? Yeah, throw in create or something like that.
I mean, I was saying maybe, but you guys are saying no. But I'm like, let's at least leave the option there to add it in the future. But
Okay.
I don't want to make you add functionality you don't want to add.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly see the decision to say fail on symbolic link, though there is the question of if you're in the middle of, if you're calling extract and you see as like, does fail as the symbolic link strategy mean it should do a first scan and see if there are any before writing any contents? Because if it gets to the part where it wrote contents, it's supposed to erase them, like that. Because I assume if it runs out of disk space, it just throws where it was. But this one would be, I think, fail on extract with, yes, fail mode with extract should do a 2-pass, which is probably fine. Tar's probably not all that big. Probably. Or we can just leave it out. I don't know what fail means for hard link, because again, the data's there. You're just asking, should the two things be the same blocks on disk or not?
Eddie had his hand up.
Yeah, I'm trying to reason about what ignore means on extraction. Does that mean you omit that entry completely?
Yeah.
Okay, then wouldn't that apply for hardlink too?
That's
Well,
kind of what I thought.
The problem with
I
this,
get it I get it that on compression that you don't want ignore for hard link because at least that's what I'm assuming is that hard links are supposed to be kind of transparent to the file system in general, so you kind of copy contents is more the sort of the default on compression, but on extraction, yeah, ignore just
the
feels-
concern that I have
feels
with
weird.
this, with my security hat on, is assuming that a symbolic link from a tar can contain a rooted path, is you extract a tar and now you have a symlink that has escaped the directory you were writing to. And if you don't expect symlinks, you could just say, just don't write them down.
But like throw might even be good there too. But yeah.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't feel super strongly about this. I mean, obviously, you could end up in a place where you add 4 enums for this, and I don't sure we want to be there.
Indeed.
Exactly.
And a little bit of having ignore is just so it's not 2 and people ask why wasn't it a Boolean. But the I will admit that is part of my reasoning. But my why does this actually make sense as API is, if you don't expect symlinks, then ignore means you're not subject to a symlink that escaped the directory that you were extracting to.
And didn't we decide we liked mode better than strategy at some point? I thought maybe.
Yeah, strategy is what we finished with, but then when we were done, we're like, I don't know, should it be mode or handling or?
I like mode.
Yeah, because we wrote, maybe call it link replication mode.
Strategy sounds like too Gangaphory to my taste. We already get hate on it. We don't want to be Java with the factories.
There's also handling. So Stefan likes mode. Also consider what we would name the properties here, because strategy and handling, I can see the properties matching them. Mode feels a little weird, but it's also fine.
Yeah, I like mode on the properties, of course. It should match the type name for sure.
All right. Anyone want to disagree with mode? Mode it is. I think I could just replace strategy with mode. Place all.
Maybe I missed it, but why don't we have ignore for hard link?
Because when you're so assuming that the record for tar says I'm a hard link, here's my data, and here's the thing I was linked with. The data is there, so there's not a. There's just a question of do you want to preserve the link or not. With a symbolic link, the link is the data, and it could be escaping your file system. Sorry, it can be escaping your directory of containment. So it makes more sense to say don't include these when I extract, and also don't exclude these when I create.
What happens on Windows when you preserve link and the feature to allow user creation of hard links has not been enabled? Because by default, that requires admin permissions.
Yeah.
I thought that was only for symbolic links.
I think it's the
believe
opposite.
it's
Hard links are the ones that are
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's both because Windows has like 3 types of links. It also has junctions, which are a
Yeah.
little bit different from the others. And junctions can be created by anyone, but hard links can't, and symlinks sometimes can. And you can opt it in for anyone, but you have to go through that process.
I mean, once it's a different enum, we can say that hard link mode preserve link is it writes a link if it can and data if it can't.
What
Yeah.
if you want it to?
Or we could make preserve link and preserve link if able as separate entities.
Another thing TMDS brought up, which I think is fair, is like skip probably is a better name than ignore. For that part of the unum, because like Eric was asking, like, does ignore mean skip? Because it could be like, well, is it ignoring its link status, or no, you're just skipping it.
Okay. So do we care to say tar hard link mode is we have preserve link if able, and copy contents?
So there's no option to skip it if you're able to preserve it, is basically what it comes down to. But if you can't preserve it, you skip it.
If you really care about skipping things, you could, you could extract yourself. You could walk the entries and make that decision.
Sure. Again, like I said, that my
Totally.
real reason is to have more than 2 options, so people don't say, "Great, can we just turn it back into a boolean?"
I mean, I don't think we need to get bullied into it for that reason. If we think 2 options is the most sensible thing, we should do that. But like, I think the discussion we've had around throwing or skipping or whatever is enough to think that we should need an enum, even if we think only 2 options really make sense right now. And maybe we'll always think that. But like, yeah, we should definitely keep the enum. If 2 options are best, it's best. But yeah, definitely wouldn't want to switch this back to a bool based on this discussion.
Yeah, and I think while users may end up in rare cases wanting to go and roll their own extraction, I think being able to effectively have preserve link if able, or just ignore, is a common thing that users will end up wanting. And so I don't think it's something that you really want to force users off the golden path and to have to go and roll everything themselves, which introduces risk and other problems.
So is that we should go ahead and make the distinction between preserve link and preserve link if able?
Yeah, I think so. And then making sure we have preserve link, copy contents, and ignore for the other.
Is there a reliable way for us to like query whether we're able to do it, or will we just like see the failure and like handle it? I was just curious.
I don't think there's an API off the top
No.
of my head.
No, I think what we do for our test is just execute the Windows API and make sure that if it works, it means we are able. If it doesn't, we just skip for the test that required.
So we already just ignore failures in this case.
No, I mean for tests that work with links, not necessarily the tar test.
I see. So because we haven't written this yet. Okay. Because like the other thing is like, do people really need this to throw if it failed? Like maybe that could just be the default behavior of preserve link.
It's fair.
Like that is going to be the default behavior of tar in general. So I want it to be like user friendly. Like making a best effort. Like if we're literally limited by our user permissions, it's not like our fault that we skipped it. Like you should have asked us to do something that's impossible. You can use the lower level API if you want to know that we're skipping this, to like kind of Eric's point, or that there are these hard links that you're unable to deal with.
Yeah, preserve link if able also, for what it's worth, only makes sense on extract, not create, which is fine. Saying preserve link if able on create is, yep, I was able. But yeah, so, and then Chad is bringing up like, oh, well, we could have different policy for links that are contained in links that go outside, and presumably we could also say rooted versus unrooted, and that's one of the benefits of the enum is we can certainly be like skip rooted, skip escape. We can let there be more policy modes with a enum than we could with a boolean. And again, most of them only make sense for symbolic links, not hard links. So. All right, and do we like skip or omit?
I like skip.
Or ignore.
But both are better than ignore.
I like skip. It's more common than omit. But yeah, I
Yeah,
agree. Both are better than ignore.
I'm not seeing very many omits. There are a few, but all right. Are we good shipping this? Or at least letting it go back to Roddick to implement and Tom to object to, and then maybe bring back a modification later?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's like let's see if we can encode all these in the actual behavior, and if that makes sense, then go with it. If not, they might come back and tell us, "Hey, this is rough." But yeah, seems acceptable.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for staying late so we could close that one out. All right. Do the 11s fit on one screen now?
Slight nit on what you just posted. The default values, I think, had the wrong type names. I don't know if you want to fix that. But otherwise, I think it's
Yep. No, don't you know there's a new C# language feature? It just guesses what you meant.
That'd be sick. It'd be perfect for AI. Just anyway.
It sounds very Windowsy.
Yes, I mean, you got to appreciate sometimes how far Windows will go to like try to make your code work.
Yeah, until the times that you're upset with what it chose to do, and you have to spend hours and hours fighting it to get it to do what you want. So, all right. And the answer is no, the 11s don't fit on one screen. But maybe we'll make... Did I not mark this one as approved? I did not. Oh, that's going to screw up the video links.
Jeremy, for next session, do you know if it's string wrappers finally next in queue?
You're behind add password to zip archive. It's just
And then it's a string.
it'll probably be a 1 hour issue, and then
Okay.
fine, I'll push the button.
So how are you liking the? Oh, sorry.
Needing to hit
Can I ask how
F5's
you're
fine.
liking-
Uh,
Oh, yeah.
I'm just being upset that the second issue is marked as API approved, but it's still showing up in the view as ready for review. So I'm pushing the flush cache button.
Okay, hopefully that works. But anyway,
Yep.
I like not having to reload the.
Yes, I
document.
hate the Blazor. I lost my connection with the host pop-ups, so I'm
And it's gone mostly.
I'm
if
happy
you're not
with the
in
change.
published view.
so.
Yeah.
And hey, future now exists at the bottom of the screen. All the 11s fit on one screen. So, but yeah, so David Vivi, you will be second next time, unless something comes up, which means we'll probably get to it. I would have thought, I would have thought we would have made more progress today, but apparently Adams was an hour and 40 minutes. So.
I see. Okay.
So yeah, and
It
then
sucks.
we'll finally be out of the unsorted things because
Yeah.
you're like an
Yeah.
hour and a half behind this one, is what it came down to.
I see. It really sucks to be known first on the handout because you never know how much you're going to wait. But yeah,
Yep.
it is what it is.
Yep, and then they're also in Europe, so it's being non-first for them is even worse. So, all right, well, thanks everyone for joining us. We definitely talked about process for a lot longer than I wanted to, but I think we're in a good place, and we'll see you next week, same .NET time at our same .NET channel, where we will be starting with add password to zip archive, unless for some reason no one's available to represent it. So if that's your cup of tea, then be sure to join us on time, by which I mean the 5 or 10 minutes late that we normally start. Till then, auf Wiedersehen.